Okay, everyone. I'm so glad to see you. Today, we're going to talk about social emotional development in middle childhood. So, this is our last domain that we're talking about when we talk about middle childhood. And there's some really big changes that happen in how children interact with their peers and how they perceive their relationships with their peers. It's this movement away from the family and a more concentrated focus on peers. So we're going to talk about what that looks like and what are some different theories about peer relationships in middle childhood. Okay. So two of the theorists that we're going to talk about are Erikson and Freud. So if we remember, Erikson's talking about this is the stage that children are having that kind of battle between industry and inferiority. And we want children to have a balance between both in order for them to achieve to feel like they can do things in middle childhood and know that they have a realistic view of their abilities, but they still have a positive, realistic view of their abilities. This is the age where they're comparing themselves to their peers. That's how they're judging how well they do something. This is especially true in school. So you'll see children who are comparing their science test scores and saying, well, what did you get on your science test? Well, I got a 50 out of 50. Oh, well, I got a 20 out of 50. And just that comparison can lead to inferiority. So it doesn't have to be an explicit, I'm smarter than you are. It's really them looking and comparing and saying, oh, well, they did better than me and I had to study really hard, so I must not be good at this. So it's an important thing to think about if we're going to work with children in a school setting, to make sure that testing is not the only way that we're looking at how well children do at a subject, which we talked about in the last chapter. It really has to do with how we're building their feeling and their understanding of industry, their ability to do something. Okay. Freud says that children are starting to internalize societal norms and values. If you remember, we talked about Freud and the id, the ego, and the superego. And the id were those biological drives, right? The things that, like as a baby, if I'm hungry, if I'm tired, if I have to go to the bathroom, those are all biological drives. What Freud says is now in middle childhood, children still have those biological drives, but they also are starting to know, okay, it's not okay for me to start crying and throwing a tantrum in the middle of my fourth grade classroom because I'm hungry. I have to be able to regulate that id, or those biological drives. And what that is the super ego developing. It's the understanding, okay, I can act like that in this situation, but not this situation. In school, I can't act like this because everyone's going to look at me. So that's the super ego coming into play. Questions between Erikson and Freud? Yeah, okay, let's keep going. Kohlberg is a big moral theory theorist, so moral development theorist. He used something called the Heinz dilemma. Has anyone heard of the Heinz dilemma before, besides in your reading? It's a really, really cool test, and we can test ourselves in this way as well. So the Heinz dilemma is a story about a man. He was an elderly man, and his wife had a really rare form of cancer. And there was no drug for this cancer until this other young man developed this cancer drug that he spent $100 developing, but he was selling it for $2,000. The man didn't have $2,000. He went all the way, all over his community, tried to save up enough money, but could only save $1,000. So he goes to this other man who developed the drug and said, please let me I can give you half now and pay you back in installments. Can you just give me a break? My wife really needs this or she's going to die. And the guy who made the drug said, no, I made this. I worked hard for it. You have to pay the full $2,000. And so this man decides to break into the factory, steal the drug for his wife, and his wife lives. So the dilemma is, what Kohlberg did was ask children at different ages how they felt about the situation, what they felt about the dilemma. And when we see younger children in level 1, the pre-conventional morality, they look at things very black and white. It's punishment versus reward. So usually children at that age will say, well, the man should go to jail because he did something wrong. Very, very black and white. They don't take anything else into consideration. Level 2 is conventional morality. These people care more about the effects of their actions on others. So how are other people going to think of me? This is typically older children in middle childhood. So, well, if the man steals the wife for his drugs, she's going to be so happy and love him even more. So how do my actions affect somebody else? This last level, Kohlberg says, not a lot of people get to, even in adulthood. Some of us stay in conventional morality. How are my actions going to be perceived by others? So in level 2, an example of that is somebody who donates money to a charity, but then wants to make sure that they're the first person on the news and get that recognition of donating money to a charity. Like, oh, I'm such a good person. I donated all this money, because the perception is what's important to them. So morally, they're still in level 2, according to Kohlberg. What he says about level 3 is this idea of justice. People and individuals, and usually late teens, can be in this post-conventional stage of morality where the thought is, well, that man should have stolen the drug because his wife was sick, but maybe he should have confessed and served his time because he did do a crime, but his wife still could have got the drug. So they're thinking about this ethically, they're thinking about the justice aspect of it, and they're looking at making sure everybody in the situation was justified in their actions. Does that make sense? Does that help a little bit? Okay. I like this video. It gives you a different scenario, but the same kind of dilemma, and then breaks down each of the stages. So I encourage you to watch that as well. Okay. All right, self-understanding. So we talked again a little bit about this in early childhood, but what we're going to see is growth again in this concept. So children now have a more realistic sense of themselves, their self-concept. If we remember in social development in early childhood, their understanding was not realistic. They thought they were the best jumper in the whole world and the strongest person in their whole class. Where in middle childhood, they're like, okay, I might not be the best, but I'm really good at this. I struggle at this, but I'm working on it. So their concept is a lot more realistic. Still, there's a huge influence by peers, family, and the media, because they're developing their self-concept according to what the expectations are in their environment. So what are the peer expectations of my abilities? What are my family expectations of my abilities? And what does the media say is the ideal self-concept? Do I match up to that? And what we're seeing is discrepancies in a child's self-concept and their ideal selves according to what they perceive on the media and their peers and family. If there's a discrepancy where the self-concept is a lot lower than their ideal selves, their self-esteem is impacted. They feel poorly about their abilities, which makes sense, right? And a lot of the times they shouldn't feel bad because those expectations are unrealistic. In the same respect, discrepancies in self-efficacy and the ability to do something can also create problems with motivation. And what self-efficacy is the knowledge about being able to do something. So if I feel efficacious, I know I can do something. I feel confident in my abilities. Okay, so if I have really high self-efficacy, but then I fail at things and I get feedback about how I'm failing at something, I'm not going to be motivated to do it again. For example, if a child, let's use sports, they feel really efficacious in their ability to score a goal. and they try maybe 5 times and they keep getting it out of the net. What's going to happen is they're not going to want to play anymore. You've probably seen children do this where they try and try, well, I don't want to play anymore. I'm done. I'm bored. This is stupid. Right? Anybody see a child in middle childhood with that reaction? This is what happens with that discrepancy between efficacy and ability. And what we're trying to do is provide motivation for children in this age, which is that next slide. So when we're motivating children, we need to understand how we're going about that motivation, because that can be impactful as well. There's a difference between intrinsic and extrinsic motivation. So with intrinsic motivation, what we're trying to place in the child's abilities and thought processes. I am doing something because it feels good to do it. I'm doing something because it's the right thing to do. It's that goal towards personal satisfaction. Okay. But we are an extrinsic reward society all around, in schools, in sports, just in life. Look at college. Guess what's an extrinsic reward? A grade. Think about when you're in college and what are you working towards? You're working towards that A or a B. That's an extrinsic reward. I'm giving you something tangible for the work that you're doing. That's extrinsic. Another place where I see this a lot is in behavior therapy. So you do something right, I'm going to give you a sticker. You say something nice to your friends, I'm going to give you this candy. If you come to school all week long, you get to pick a treasure from the treasure box. It really is an extrinsic reward society. And what are we teaching children about motivation when we provide extrinsic rewards? We're teaching them, well, I'm going to do this, but I'm going to do this because I get something in return. And those aren't the adults that we want in our community. We don't want adults that say, well, I'm going to volunteer my time, but it's because I get volunteer hours on my college application. I'm going to, I don't know, take care of my elderly grandparent, but because they're going to leave me a lot of money in their will. Like that when we have extrinsic reward systems, that's the kind of mindset we're creating, is I'm not going to do something for nothing. And that's not altruism. Our goal should work towards altruism, where we're doing something because it's right. Okay. Questions about the difference between intrinsic and extrinsic?
Are there certain societies and cultures that more towards one than the other, or is it kind of flat across the board that all humans are extrinsically more motivated than intrinsic?
That's a really good question. When it's a more collectivist society, there's a lot more of those intrinsic reward system. Is I'm doing this for the better of our community. I'm doing this for the better of our family. I'm doing this because that's my role in my community. Whereas in that individualistic society, it's, well, I need to get something. If I'm going to work this hard, I better get a reward for it and something I can see. So like a promotion or a raise, those are all extrinsic reward systems. Good question. All right, so what happens when we have this combination of a low sense of self-efficacy and low motivation? We get something called learned helplessness. This used to be a situation that was unique to children with unique needs, but now we know that all children can develop this learned helplessness if that balance and that combination of low self-esteem and low efficacy and low motivation all happens at the same time. And what this is the ability or the thought process of, I can't do something, so why try? Why try it anymore? I'm just going to not even initiate a try. I'm not going to put myself out there because every time I do, I fail. so I'm not going to try anymore. That's called learned helplessness. And what we see is children who kind of get this attitude, and a lot of times right when they're entering middle school, and they hate school, they don't want to be there. You give them an assignment and they're like, I don't want to do this, I'm just going to do badly on it anyway. And it really is this idea of I don't have any control over the ability to do better, so I'm not going to try at all. And it's something that can be supported. And when we just kind of give in and say, well, then don't do it, and now you're in trouble and you're on I was going to say grounded, but your detention. There you go. That's what I was looking for. You're in detention. If we're punishing children who are experiencing this learned helplessness, it's just giving into that feeling of, see, I told you I was just going to get in trouble anyway, so now I'm really not going to try. But instead, supporting the child in what you know that child can do. You know what? I really saw how you shot that basketball in the hoop and you made it 3 times in a row. Can you show me how you did that? Make them the expert. Put them in a place where now they're teaching you, because what that does is it builds self-esteem, it builds efficacy, and then it goes to building motivation. Okay. Questions about learned helplessness?
This is my nephew right now. He's going to be 8 at the end of this month, and he hates reading. He hates it. He's at a lower level. He's way behind. And my brother and sister-in-law are so busy because they both work, and they only see him for like an hour after school before it's, dinner and everything. And so they don't work with him every night. And he comes to see me, and we spend like a week together on all the breaks for school. And that's my goal with him. It's like, we need to sit down. He needs some wins. Like, he needs to feel like he can do this. So the books they usually send with him are the grade where he's supposed to be, and that's not where he is. Right. So like, we get the kindergarten books and we just start there. And like, once you get when he has some wins and he reads some books really fast, then it's like, yes, he gets it. And there's more drive, but it is like pulling teeth to get him to initiate wanting to read.
Right. That
so
motivation.
This is him right now.
That's it. Catherine, that's such a good example of how to support a child who's in this stage of learned helplessness. They need wins. What a great way to say that. And you just described Vygotsky. Vygotsky says, work with that child's zone of proximal development. Mm-hmm. So if that child's ability is right now at a 4 or 5-year-old, and you're working with him at an 8-year-old level, that's outside of the zone of proximal development. If right. you work right above where he's at, so at that kindergarten level, now he feels confident, like, oh, hey, I just read that whole page. Like, I can do this. I'm going to read the next page. I read the next page. Oh, maybe I am good at this. Then you see a shift in that self-esteem. Thank you for sharing that. Okay, let's keep going. Oops, sorry. So the next thing, when we talked about this a little bit too in early childhood, is gender identity. So even though gender identity forms in early childhood, what we're seeing now is this deeper understanding of different components of gender identity and how they're making their minds up about what it means to be a boy and a girl are still the same as in early childhood. They're using their peers, they're using media, they're using society and their family to decide what is femaleness, what is maleness, and is there a spectrum in between. And they're also looking at the interaction between biology, between society, and representational influences. They're looking at, what is it okay for me to play with? What is it okay for me to wear? What are my peers going to say if I'm a girl and I cut off all my hair? Are they going to think I'm a boy, or am I going to be accepted by my peers? They're also starting into this biological transition into their sexuality, their sexual identity. Children usually know who they're attracted to or have a sense of attraction by 5th or 6th grade. They might not be able to verbalize that. They might not be able to explain it or talk about it, but biologically that shift is happening. Whether as parents we want to admit that or not, there's a shift happening there. there, and our responsibility as the adults is to support them through that really kind of scary and often confusing process, and to be accepting of that transition. Questions about gender identity? No? Okay. All right, now the family. We've talked about how important the family component is in a child's upbringing and in a child's development of all these things like self-concept and self-esteem. But in middle childhood, there's this shifting away from the family and this clinging on to a peer group for defining who we are and how we feel about each other as children. And that's so difficult because a child could have an amazing and supportive family atmosphere, but if their best friend tells them they don't want to be their friend anymore, it's devastating. And the only solution for that child is often a reconnection with that peer group. There's nothing a parent can do rather than just listen to solve that feeling of not belonging or not feeling good about that peer interaction until the peers have reconnected or they connect with a new peer, which is so difficult for us as adults. We want to fix everything, but we are not as important in the child's life anymore. Peers are where it's at. So whatever the peers think, that's going to be what's the most important thing for a child. What parents can do is modify their approach to parenting. So this is an age where children are just like they were in early childhood, but in a different way. They're trying to be more independent. They're trying to be transition into this. I'm almost a grown up. Like I know what I'm doing. I can make my own decisions. I know what I like now. And so I'm not saying go into permissive parenting where you're like, sure, do whatever you want. You make the choices, but being a little more flexible and hearing the child out, having them be able to have a say in some of those choices that they're making with either it's classes or sports or maybe outings that they want to go to, just having a little bit more independence. I'll be honest, this was something I really struggled with as my daughter was coming into this middle childhood age. It's been us two for so long, and we had this really good bond and really good relationship. And then all of a sudden I wasn't her favorite person anymore. And she just wanted to hang out with her friends. And I was that mom who would stay at all the birthday parties and like be the only mom there and just like hang out and talk to the mom hosting or the dad hosting it. And all of a sudden she didn't want me there anymore. And that was really hard for her to be like, okay, you can go home now. But it was a perfect example of what parents can do to support that independence. She wanted to be her own person at that birthday party, and I was holding her back. So to step away and let her be independent in those friendships was my way of shifting my parenting approach. So what does the family atmosphere look like? Even though we're not the most important aspect of that child's being in this stage of childhood, it's still important that we're providing a healthy family atmosphere for that child to have a safe place to come home to. And what does that look like? It is more than providing the basic needs of shelter, food, and clothing. In this stage, it's so important that children are thinking that education is important. Are we asking about schoolwork? Are we asking them what they did at school? Are we not accepting a shrug and a as an answer, right? Are we pulling out a little bit more information? So instead of asking yes, no questions like, did you have a good day? Because what can a child say? Yes or no. Asking instead, what did you do at school today? Tell me about that math assignment that you were working on. How did your science project go? Did you talk to your friend Susie about some of the things she said that hurt your feelings? Like, how did that go? Really being involved in what the child is doing at school. And what that does is show the child that, okay, school's important because my family is asking about it. Making sure that we're developing self-esteem at home. So not being as punitive when the child makes a mistake, really acknowledging when the child does something great, instead of constantly pointing out what child's doing wrong, pointing out when the child is doing something right. Like, oh, thank you so much for putting those dishes away. That really helped me out today. What they're doing is building on that self-esteem. Nurturing friendships with peers. I grew up in a time where we didn't have to schedule time for our friends. You just like went outside and played with whoever was out there. But I have a child in this era where we do play dates. And it is really interesting to me that I have to schedule time for my child to play with other children. But that's how I nurtured her friendships. I made sure that at least on a weekly basis, she was connecting with other children. I felt it was especially important for my child, who has no siblings, to develop that peer connection. Her friends are her family. She has a very tight connection with a set of friends she's been friends with for several years now. And so they're so important to her. And if she misses time with them, she feels like she's not going to have that same connection, and she's going to be left out of that peer group. So it was my responsibility to make sure she was getting together with them, she was connecting with them. I wanted to teach her and model to her what a good girlfriend is. A good girlfriend is somebody who's so excited when their friend does something great. A good girlfriend is there to listen and be trusted, and to make sure that the other person is making right decisions, and telling the other person if you're afraid when they're not making right decisions. That's something that sometimes needs to be taught, because we have this transition in society where girls have such a competitive nature with each other, and it's I need to be the best, and if you are the best, then that means I'm not the best, and so we can't be friends. So what is it, frenemies? I don't want frenemies to happen. I want good, strong, healthy friendships to develop. And in order to do that, I have to provide her opportunities to nurture those friendships.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, go for it, Hunter.
Like, I always appreciated my mom for like allowing me to have my friends over. Like all the time when I was a kid, I would have sleepovers, or I would go over to friends' houses. Like, she always let me do that. And it's like, now I have friends who I've had since like 4th grade.
Yeah.
So it's really nice. And, I know what it means to be a really good friend. And it's like, I always make these friends where it's like these friendships just last forever. So
that's so awesome to hear, Hunter. And that, honestly, as a mother, that's the goal, right? You want your children to have healthy, long-lasting friendships, especially if that's where they're going to turn to as a foundation for their self-esteem. If you see your child surrounding themselves with people who are constantly negative towards them, or when we're talking about bullying in a second, putting them down, telling them they're incapable, then you're seeing your child kind of being kind of beat down in their self-esteem, and no parent wants to see that. So teaching children how to interact and build healthy friendships. I'm so glad you got that opportunity, Hunter. The last one is providing harmony and stability. And I really, really feel like this is important, because children are, school's a jungle. Middle school, even elementary school, where middle childhood is happening. It's hard. You're constantly, as a child, having to be who you think your peers are going to accept, and that transition between different social settings is not easy. And then you're learning all these things academically. So when a child comes home, that should be their place where they can just, I can breathe. I can be myself. I know my family is going to love me, even if I completely break down right now. I know my daughter, sometimes when she comes home, she just tells me, can you just squeeze me for like 10 seconds? And so I literally just have to squeeze her. And she's like, okay, thank you. I can function now. But it's hard. It's hard to be a child these days. And that home should be that safe place, that place of harmony, that place they know they can always go to feel safe. Questions about the family environment? Okay, we're going to look at the family stress model. So what happens when it isn't a place of harmony? This model is interesting because it doesn't start with the families feuding. It actually starts with financial difficulties. There's research that shows that finances are usually a key indicator of future stress to come within the family. So if there are financial difficulties, usually that affects the parents' moods, which then affects how they interact, which then affects them in their marriage and relationship, which then leads to poor parenting. And it's not intentional. These parents still love their children, but there's such a focus on how am I going to make ends meet? How am I going to be in my relationship and save a healthy relationship? I can't focus on parenting right now. I have to focus on these adult issues. And then with poor parenting comes poorer child adjustment. So the child isn't getting what they need from the adults in their world because there's such a focus on something else. And that stress goes from parent to child really easily. Parents a lot of the times think they can hide their stress from children. Like if they don't see it, they won't know. Children are very intuitive. Children can feel when there's something going on in their home. You can put on a happy face and a smile, but children know when what you're feeling is stress, and children will always find a way to make it their fault. So let's not give them an opportunity to make it their fault. So that's the family stress model. But what I want to focus on is that it starts with finances. It doesn't start with poor parenting. It starts with financial issues. Okay. All right, let's keep going. So we talked about a couple family structures the last time, but are in the last stage of childhood. But I want to talk about how there's such a diverse view of families. There's so many different family structures. This is a concept I talk about in the diversity class, and we spend an entire 3 hours on it because it's so important to acknowledge a child's family. A child's family is a huge component of their identity, so who they are, and it's so important to make sure that we're respecting that family structure. Abby was saying, my mom still tries to hide her stress, but she can see right through her. Yeah, you can't hide it. And what it does for children, it's one thing to try and hide your stress. It's another thing to treat the child as an adult and share about adult issues with your young child. So don't do that either. But it's okay to say, you know what, I'm feeling a little bit sad right now. And I kind of feel like I need to cry. Children need to see that their parents are human, and that's okay. And apologizing or trying to hide emotions, it makes it so that the child grows up to feel like those emotions are unhealthy, and which is not healthy either. Also, if we're oversharing with children, they tend to take on the responsibility, and they feel like it's their job to make you feel better as a child, to make their parent feel better. And that's a responsibility. That's an unfair responsibility for a young child, for any child, honestly. No matter what age you are, it's an unfair responsibility. But it's okay to be real with your child about the emotions that you're feeling. I'm feeling a little bit sad right now. I'm feeling really angry, because what that does is it gives children the language and the safety to say, hey, I had a really bad day at school today and I'm feeling sad. To name those emotions helps with mental health. Okay. All right, back to family structures. So singlehood families. We tend to not think of families without children as families. So if this is even a single person or a single person with a partner, they're still a family. Even if there's no children in the home, it's still considered a family structure. Another family structure is families with one parent. And immediately we think single parent families, which is a huge, vast majority of families with one parent. But the reasons behind families with one parent is what we don't think about. This can be a single parent family because a parent died. It could be a single parent family because an individual said, I no longer want to wait for a partner to start a family. And there's all kinds of reproductive assisted technology. And I can have a child by myself. So that's another way a parent could be a parent by themselves. Okay. Two-parent families, we can look, so many different families fit into the two-parent family model. It's called the nuclear family when there's two parents. But we just look at it as the norm, which is really interesting, because if you are anything outside of the norm, people question your family style. People feel bad for your family structure, when research shows that as long as a child has a healthy relationship with a caregiver, they can function in normalcy. They don't need a nuclear family in order to have the most successful outcome, which is important to know and realize. But parts of two-parent families are cohabitation. This term was kind of coined before gay marriage was legalized, and it was two parents living together, or two adults living together, sharing a space, sharing a family, and they didn't have to be married. A lot of married couples today actually say that they lived together before they even got married. I see a lot of children in their own parents' weddings, so they were cohabitating before they were married. Blended families. So this would be families who come into a marriage with children already, and then the families are blending their children together. That's not easy. It's not easy to do, especially depending on the ages of the children. It requires a lot of work, a lot of support, but it is a family altogether. And if you're interested in family structures, I really advise you to take the 262, because we talk about terminology and how that can be harmful for children. Words like your real mom, your fake mom, like that's, who is a real mom? What is a real mom? So those are terms we talk about in the 262 class. So families with additional adults, with this recession that we're experiencing, which has a really good chance of turning into a depression, we're going to see a lot of extended families or multi-generational families living under one roof, which means it'll be parents and grandparents, maybe aunts and uncles. And what does that mean for the child? If done right, it could be wonderful for that child to have connection to so many different adults and family members under one household. I grew up in a multi-generational family household, and it was wonderful to have so many people who you could go to and spend time with and get a hug from. But it also meant that you had so many parents who could parent you. So you didn't get away with anything in that house, because grandma could spank you, and dad could spank you, and your aunt could spank you, and mom could spank, everybody could spank you. So you just kind of ran around the house with your hands over your bottom, because you didn't know who was going to spank you at any moment. So that could also be something that happens from a multi-generational household, is who does the parenting in that household. Other parts of families with additional adults are families by choice. I really like this phrase because so many of us have maybe a best friend or somebody we've grown up with that you consider family. That person is closer to you than maybe your blood relatives. I know, for example, in Hawaii, I have family in Hawaii, and when you go to the island, everyone who's older than you, so if you're a woman who's older than you, you're an auntie. And so if you go anywhere, they're going to greet you, hi auntie, like, oh, what can I do for you? It's a family island, and so you're going to be family just by being there and being an elder. I'll give you another example. So you hear me talk about Dr. Brennan all the time. She is one of my best friends. And a lot of times, because when I don't have a partner to talk about parenting with, I talk to her and say, hey, I'm really stressed out about this choice I have to make. Like, what do you think? And I bounce ideas off of her. I consider her family because she is somebody that will give me advice. She's seen me at my worst and my best and has never judged me. So that's family. So who do you think of as family? Adoptive families are a different type of family as well. When we look at adoption, there's a few different ways that adoption can function. Research shows that open adoption seems to have the best outcomes for young children. And what that means is children know that they're adopted. They have some aspect of connection to their birth family. Whether that's pictures or just knowing their birth family story or visitation. And what that does is it answers those questions that a lot of children who are adopted end up having. It kind of eliminates that, the unknown for children. And then there's closed adoptions where children often don't know they're adopted and don't find out until adulthood, if ever. Let's see, kinship families. So kinship care used to be a bigger deal. We're not seeing it called kinship care anymore. And I can't, your book doesn't talk about it, but I can't off the top of my head think of what the new word, it just changed last year. But what kinship care is a relative taking care of another relative. For example, I talk about my brother who is adopted in this class, and he is biologically my cousin. He had an older brother who was too old, who didn't want to be adopted. He just needed a home until he turned 18. And so my mom, who was his aunt, did kinship care for him. So he came into the home as my cousin, even though his baby brother was adopted as my brother. So it's really fun to go out in public and be like, this is my cousin and our brother. So you just never know what's going to come up with our family. But it's a family member taking care of another family member in need. Okay. Interracial marriage. So when we have a multiracial family, you're now working with all kinds of different components that will come up. This is really kind of something that hits students like, what? Interracial marriage wasn't even legalized until 1969. So people of two different races could not get married until 1969. Like, this wasn't just like years, hundreds and thousands of years ago. This is the 1900s that we're talking about, when it was illegal to marry somebody of a different race. It was not that long ago, which is just crazy to think about. And there's still countries where it's a lot more fresh. Africa, for example, South Africa had apartheid, if you're familiar with apartheid, and it was illegal for a Black person and a white person to be married, to have a relationship at all. And children who were developed from an interracial relationship were evidence of an illegal activity. Can you imagine that, being a child and having that weight of what my parents did was illegal? I'm a product of illegal activity. That's a lot of weight for a young child to take on. So now you're having children who are having to pick one identity because let's forbid that they want to pick more than one identity, because society wants us to just fit perfectly in this one little box and we can't go outside of that box. Even the US Census only allows us to pick one race. Think about that. And it is 2020 and we can still pick one race. So having parents who are interracial and then being a product of parents who are interracial, again, brings into the light all kinds of issues with identity. Okay. Questions about parenting or family styles?
I have quite a few friends that either I've grown up with or that I've met throughout the years. And I refer to them, to my daughter, as Auntie Stephanie, Auntie Shannon. And so there is no blood relation, but right. I want her to grow up knowing that if she might have trouble coming to me with something, that they are options. And I would trust whatever they were to tell her regarding whatever, any type of topic she might bring. Mm-hmm. So she refers to them as aunties, even at like 2 and 3, she called them Auntie Stephanie and Auntie Shelly, because I want her to know that, like, I grew up with really powerful women, mm-hmm. and I have 2 sister-in-laws and I love them dearly, but there are certain things that I know if you were to go to them, I'm like, So I have like a network of really close friends, and I'm like, look, if she ever comes to you, I trust whatever you were to tell her. So
I,
All my best friends auntie too. So.
and I love that.
Yeah.
It really, like you said, it gives children multiple safe spaces in a pretty scary world. And so why not have all these people that children can go to, all these trusted people that children can go to?
More support, the better.
Right, exactly, Kristen. Thank you both for sharing. Let's see. Okay. So what happens when any of these family structures gets divorced? One of the things I talk about in the 262 class is my least favorite term when it comes to families is a broken family. There is no such thing as a broken family. There's a different family structure, but no broken child, no broken family. What that term does is it implies that it needs fixing, and oftentimes divorce is the fix. We might think that, oh, well, children don't do very well when they're a product of divorce. That's not true. Research actually shows that the majority of children, up to 80% of children and the adults who experience divorce, suffer no long-term effects. When it's done right, it's often a healthy choice for families and for their children. So that fear that, oh, I'm going to mess up my children and mess up my life if we go through the separation or divorce is a fallacy, is a misconception, because research shows that that's not the case. Short-term consequences that can occur through divorce are things like grief over losses, and these are completely typical. So it's a change, it's a big change for children, but look at how these are short-term. The grief over losses is, well, I'm not going to be able to spend as much time with both my parents together. That's natural. It's natural to feel sad about that. Reduced standard of living. This is especially true for families who are already struggling financially. Now, with the loss of an income, children are having to restructure maybe their way of life, their way of living. They don't get all the brand new brand name clothes. They don't get to go to birthday parties every weekend, because that means a gift every weekend. So maybe that's changing. And then adjusting to the transitions. This is probably the hardest for children, is what day is mom's day? What day is dad's day? What day is, depending on who's splitting the custody, what day am I going with whom? That's a tough transition, having to balance a schedule, especially when there's no schedule in place. And it's kind of like, oh, well, today you're just going to go here, and it's not going to be the same next week. So that adjustment is often difficult for children initially in the short term, but children are resilient, and a lot of times they get to know the schedule pretty quickly. When there are long-term consequences, when we see consequences, we kind of think negative, but not all consequences are bad. So one of them is, we talked about it in the short term, the economic occupational status. So depending on finances, that way of life can change. Improved relationship with the custodial parent. So oftentimes this is mom, and what we're seeing is that that relationship gets stronger, the bond grows, because there's more quality time being spent between the two, between mother and children, or father and children if they're the custodial parent. There's greater emotional independence in sons. And again, a lot of this research is conducted based on the idea that mothers are the primary caregivers or the custodial parent. And what they're seeing is that when sons spend more time with that maternal figure, they actually develop a greater sense of emotion and a better ability to portray those emotions in a healthy way. One of the long-term consequences into adulthood are feelings of greater anxiety in their own relationship. So that fear of, I'm going to end up just like my parents, or I need to be a perfect partner because I don't want to get divorced like my parents. That's a lot of pressure, and a lot of times it follows individuals into adulthood. And then the adjustment of the custodial parent. So oftentimes if somebody's leaving a relationship, they're leaving an unhealthy environment. And so how they adjust outside of the relationship really impacts all of the other long-term consequences. If there's a healthy adjustment, then the child fares better. Questions? Nope. Okay, keep going. So let's look a little bit more at friendships. So again, we talked about how friendships are now used as the judgment of a child's worth, how competent they are, and how attractive they are. So they're looking at their friends and they're deciding, they're saying, okay, what do you find as the optimal human being, and what do you find as the optimal human being? Do I fit that criteria, yes or no? And then I'm going to make judgments based on that. They also look at peers and their peer groups to see how to perform a task. So they look at them as the experts. How do I gain popularity? So who do I sit with in order to get the most friends? Whose birthday party am I going to go to where there's going to be the most people? Okay. What to wear. So what is important to wear? What brand should I wear? What color should I wear? One of the reasons I love uniform at school. My daughter didn't have to deal with that. She wore uniform from K to 8th grade. So it was, do you want to wear a green shirt or do you want to wear a white shirt? And do you want to wear khaki pants, khaki shorts, or khaki skirt? Those are your choices. But they're still, even with uniform, I remember in 5th grade, it was no longer cool to wear the uniform skirts. It was pants only. So she was looking at her peers, nobody else was wearing skirts anymore. And so it was only pants. So even with uniform, they're looking to their peers to see what's okay to wear now. Look at the jargon and the colloquialisms in middle childhood. I swear I learned a new word every time I talk to my child because they're learning what's the cool thing to say. Am I going to speak in text language? Am I going to, I'm trying to think, so I have my tea, right? I learned what tea was, like gossip. I'm going to spill the tea. I'm going to gossip with my friends. Like I'm learning all of these things that children say, and they built this language within each other to know what's appropriate, what we say to be cool. So that's happening in middle childhood. What we listen to, so the music, it's so interesting that within a friend group, there's a specific type of music, there's a specific type of the way that you act. I remember I got really cool, like big cool points because I had Billie Eilish on my phone on my music, and I had no idea she was a big deal. And I played her song in the car once, and she's like, "How do you know this song?" And I'm like, "Oh, is this cool right now?" And so yes, we're all obsessed with Billie Eilish, and I got major cool points. I was really excited about that.
How old is your daughter?
She's in 8th grade.
Okay.
Yeah. Yep. So they all talk about Billie Eilish. They talk about their track her concert dates, and it's just like a big thing for them, but all of them like the same thing. And with peers at this age, even though we're getting into more adolescence, they're starting this in 5th and 6th grade where they're saying, well, we all should like the same things, and if you don't, then you're no longer a part of our peer group. That's what friendships are based on, is similarities. Okay, let's keep going. So, all right, let's look at stages of friendship. This is also pretty interesting too. So Bigelow is saying there's 3 stages of and differences in how we perceive friendships. The stage 1 is reward cost. So this is what we were just talking about. We like the same things and therefore we are friends. We wear the same type of clothes, we are friends. If there is a loss of similar interests, then we are no longer friends. So that's the first stage of friendship. The next stage of friendship is normative expectation. So this is typically where children are in 5th grade, more so than 3rd grade and even more so than 8th grade. This normative expectations is really strong in 5th grade. And it's an emphasis on who's nice to me. I'm going to be friends with you because you're nice to me. If you're mean to me, I don't want to be your friend. And who shares with me. So if I'm at the snack table and you give me your string cheese, you're my friend now because you just shared with me. And that was a nice thing to do. So now you've just met both of the expectations of stage 2. This last stage is a more in-depth friendship. So this involves empathy and understanding. We want to be friends with people who are loyal, who, if you tell them a secret, they're going to keep that secret and not tell anybody else. There's nothing more brutal in a friendship in 5th grade than somebody telling your secret. Like that's an end game right there for a friendship in 5th grade. You told my secret, you weren't supposed to tell anybody. And so children in that stage, it's supposed to be loyalty is everything. And if you tell my secret, we're no longer friends. The share intimate information, like I said, so this is, I'm going to tell you a secret. A lot of times in 5th and 6th grade, I'm going to tell you who I like. In boys, it's, I'm going to tell you about, you know, something that happened to me, or I'm going to tell you important information that I don't tell anybody else. And with boys and girls, it's this understanding and loyalty. Okay, questions about these 3 stages? Okay, we're going to go to the next theorist and his 5 stages. So Selman talked about 5 stages, and don't get confused because it's easy to get confused because they start with stage 0. Like who starts with stage 0? But so it looks like 4 stages, but stage 0 is the first stage. And in stage 0, what I like about Selman is that they really break it up into age groups. So stage 0 are young children. So I'm your friend because we're playing together in the sandbox. I'm your friend because you're my neighbor and you're here. So it's momentary physical interaction. You're near me right now, so we're going to be friends. I remember when my daughter was this age and we go to the park, she had a new best friend every time we went to the park. This is my best friend, Sarah. I'm like, oh, okay. You've known her for 2 seconds, but right on. And it was just because that's who she was with at that moment. In stage 1, this is one-way assistance. You helped me with something, so you're my friend. There's no thinking about now I have to return the favor. It's just, what can you give me? What can you do for me? This is really common in early childhood, but can also happen in adulthood. We hope that adults have grown out of this stage of friendship, but it's pretty common in early childhood. It's what can you give me and how can this friendship benefit me? In stage 2, it's the fair weather cooperation. So now we're helping each other. It's kind of like the you scratch my back, I'll scratch yours. So if you do something for me, I'm going to do something for you. And now we're doing nice things for each other. That's why we're friends. But there's not like a deep relationship yet. Whereas stage 3, this is that intimate and mutual sharing. It's kind of like the same stage 3 in Bigelow's theory. It's we're going to share secrets. We're going to tell each other everything. It's a big stage of loyalty again. But in this stage, what makes it different from stage 4 is there's still an emphasis on mutual similarity. So it is, we all have to like the same things. We all have to enjoy the same activities, like the same music. If you don't, it's considered an act of disloyalty. So a lot of children who are in middle childhood can be in this stage. Even into adolescence can be in this stage. It's usually not until adulthood where we reach stage 4, this autonomous interdependence. So I value when people are different, and I don't see those differences as deal breakers, right? It's not like I can't be your friend because we have a difference of opinion. You bring something to the table in a conversation. what's interesting when I was thinking about when I was creating this PowerPoint is how we're seeing so many adults actually not able to do that, especially when we think about politics. Politics have ended so many friendships and relationships because we're not able to have that autonomous interdependence. We're not able to say, we have different opinions, but I really like you as a person. Like, you're a really great parent. Like, we get along really well. We have other similarities. And can't we just like talk about our differences in a way that we understand where each other are coming from? We're not going to agree, but we have those differences and we appreciate them and we're still friends. That's at a higher level of functioning a lot of times that adults aren't able to do right now. So thinking about that, that's stage 4, higher level. Are we going to stay in stage 3, or can we move to stage 4 as adults? Let's think stage 4 maybe. Any questions about these 5 stages? No? Okay. All right. So categories of peer relationships. How we have developed these categories is through a sociometric assessment. And what was done where children were asked, pick the 3 most popular. So the 3 children you like to play with most, and the 3 children you like to play with least. And what they did was they looked at how many votes each child got in each category and separated children into these different categories. So the first category is popular, and they say these are the children who receive the most votes and I like to play with this child, and very few votes and I do not like to play with this child. Then there's the children who are rejected, and it's the complete opposite. They have a lot of unfavorable votes and very few favorable votes. The controversial child is a child that's mentioned equally in both categories. The neglected child is rarely mentioned in either category, so children might not even mention this child's name at all. And then the average child has a few votes in each, so not a lot in each, but just a few in each. What this theory doesn't do is tell us why. Why do children like to play with this child? What makes a child popular versus a child who's rejected? That's what we're going to talk about in this next theory. Okay. So there's popular, and a lot of times when we think popular, we think, oh, you might think positive, but if you had a bad experience with popularity, then you might go negative. But there are both positive and negative popularity. So there's popular pro-social and popular anti-social. With popular pro-social, these are children who are kind to everyone. They have really good social skills. They're able to connect with multiple different people. They do pretty well in school, and they're very cooperative. These are the problem solvers. These are the conflict managers. These are the children who don't like it when people fight, so they try to make everyone friends and make sure it's a positive experience for everyone. If they see somebody who's sad, they're going to be the person who goes over and tries to make them feel better. That's popular pro-social. That's why people like them, because they're kind. Popular antisocial, I always think of Mean Girls, the movie. And this can be both males or females, but they gain popularity by acting tough, being mean, spreading rumors about the other people so that they gain popularity over other people. And so they're more, it's more notoriety than popularity. It's, I know that person, I'm going to stay away from them because they're mean, but I know who they are. Remember, popularity is, I know who you are. Okay. Questions yet? No, okay. Rejected, withdrawn. So children who are rejected and withdrawn, they're usually really shy and really kind of targets for bullies or for the popular antisocial. They're usually not ones who are going to try and get back at the bully, and they're not going to be the ones to tell. They don't want any more drama. They just kind of want to stay out of the spotlight, but they're easy targets because they're so passive. Rejected, aggressive children, on the other hand, these children aren't liked because they're so aggressive, because they are mean and often violent. They're loud and confrontational, but a lot of times it's due to their own insecurity. They feel like they have to overpower other children in order to for other children to stay away from them and not be mean to them. That makes sense. Questions about these 4 categories?
I have a question. Is it possible for like children to like switch between categories?
Yes, absolutely. With intervention, 100%. A lot of children who are popular antisocial, they have the characteristics to be leaders, but something in their world is causing them to think that the only way to be, they're confusing popularity and notoriety, and they might not understand that I can be kind and still be respected out of the fact that I'm kind and not respected out of fear. It's a different type of popularity. But a lot of times what we'll see is a connection between the child's interaction with peers and how the parents are interacting with the child at home. And so if we're going to support the child, a lot of times it's a holistic support and a family intervention, not just a child intervention. Good question, Hunter. Okay, so when we talk about aggression, a lot of our minds might go to physical violence, and that's not always the case. Aggression can be both physical and emotional. Research shows that mostly in males, it's physical. That's how aggression is shown. But in females, it's emotional aggression, and it looks different for each of the sexes. Aggression can be healthy, so it is part of our brain. It's activated by the amygdala, which is our emotional center of the brain. So it tells us, hey, that makes me mad. And then it's regulated by our prefrontal cortex. So all of us have that aggressive response system in our amygdala that says, ugh. So I'll give you an example. Even as an adult, if somebody cuts me off in traffic, my amygdala says, ugh, let's do something not nice with your finger. But my prefrontal cortex says, stop, you're an adult. That could be a student, you better not. And so it controls and inhibits and regulates my desire to act aggressively. Children in middle childhood and in early childhood whose prefrontal cortex is still developing don't necessarily have that ability to regulate that behavior and that aggression. And so it comes out a lot more strongly. It's also activated by testosterone. So both males and females have levels of testosterone within their body. And if there is an increase or imbalance of testosterone in each of the children, it could also lead to more aggressive behavior. Okay. The last thing that kind of triggers aggression in combination with the other things we talked about is negative experiences and emotions. So frustration, if the child has a low frustration tolerance, remember we talked about temperaments. If the child has a really hard time with frustration, they might respond more quickly. If they are in pain, either emotionally or physically, they're going to want to act out. And then heat. So have you ever in the summer felt like you were a little bit more irritable than in the winter because you're hot and uncomfortable? Yeah, I feel it all the time. And so you feel snappy. It happens with children too. So if they've just run a mile in PE and then you get a frustrating experience, you have the great recipe for aggression. And so thinking about all the components that could lead to aggression is important. Were there questions or comments?
I'm like that with the cold.
Really?
Yeah.
That's so interesting. Yeah,
when it's really cold, because I have thyroid issues, so cold is like intolerable to my body.
That makes more sense.
Super cold, it's like, just leave me alone, because I can't think of anything else. But
that makes a lot more sense.
Yeah.
I love the cold. Yeah, but the heat will do this to me. The heat just sets me off. I do not like to be uncomfortable. All right, let's keep going. So let's talk about bullying. So there's aggression and then there's bullying. This is unwanted aggressive behavior. Usually it's about either real or perceived power. So I'm trying to to uphold my power over somebody else. And what's happening is either it has the potential to be repeated. So if you tell anybody, I'm going to come back for you, or every time I pass you in the hallway, I push you. It's repetitive or has the potential to be repetitive. There's different types of bullying. Verbal bullying is just as harmful as actual physical bullying. So saying mean things to a child, writing mean things, passing notes about with something mean on them across the classroom, that's bullying. Teasing children, name calling, taunting, any kind of threats. And then even in middle childhood, we want to make sure that children know that inappropriate sexual comments are also bullying. I have something in the chat. Abby was saying that she went to Panama last year. Back to the heat. She was irritated with everyone because it was so hot. Yep, I would have been the same way, Abby. Even in a beautiful location, if I'm hot and uncomfortable, I am easily irritated. So I get it. But good thing my prefrontal cortex is developed, right? I can control those behaviors. So when we talk about verbal bullying and we talk about the sexual comments, it's important for children to know that it's not going to be accepted in any context. So even if it happens one time is too many. And a lot of people, a lot of children think it's funny, or even if the victim of the bullying is laughing at it, chances are they are uncomfortable in that moment. And laughter could be how they're dealing with that situation. It is still bullying, and how we respond as adults sets the tone for future actions. Social bullying, spreading rumors about children, purposeful exclusion, and setting up moments for embarrassing. I'll share this story. Actually, it happened this year with my child. She's been going to school with the same little boy since kindergarten, and they used to be really good friends. And this year, out of nowhere, maybe because he's comfortable with her, he had it out for her. And my daughter went to go sit down in her chair, and he pulled the chair out from under her in front of the entire class, and she fell. And and he laughed, and other children laughed. I feel good about my child being so confident because she kind of let it roll off her shoulder, but she was pissed about it. She was mad, but she wasn't embarrassed necessarily. But I went to the school. I actually talked to his father and went to the school and said, this cannot continue. But I know this kid is a good kid. He's just trying to get some kind of attention. And that is not going to be the way he's going to get attention, is at my daughter's expense. So we had this conversation, and she was really good because she stood up for herself first and told him, you don't do that. Like, you're not cool doing that. Like, I don't know what you think you're doing, but this isn't cool. You're just making yourself look mean, which I was proud of her for standing up. But the adult, it's the responsibility of the adult as well to step in during those situations. And I remember him telling her, I can't believe you told your mom. And she's like, heck yeah, I told your mom, my mom. Like, of course I'm going to tell her. She needs to know. And so he actually came up and not only apologized to her, but apologized to me and said, I'm really sorry that I did that. That wasn't nice. And these are 8th graders. And so I was proud of him for apologizing. But bullying could come off with innocent intentions at first. But if we let it continue, if we didn't address it immediately, he could have thought it was okay. She wasn't going to say anything, and he could have continued with it. And a little bit off the topic, what I don't want to ever do with young girls and young boys is reinstill the idea that if boys are mean to you, that they like you. Because what that does is it teaches young girls to accept different kinds of abuse and think it's because a boy likes me. Oh, yay, he's mean to me. He likes me. oh, that boy just, pulled my hair. Oh, he must like me. It sets up a tone of accepting abuse and thinking that it's love or like. And with young boys, it's, oh, if I want to show a girl I like them, then I must be mean to them so that they know that I like them. And so really taking that idea completely out of our dialogue is going to change and shift this idea of being mean equals like. So it's a little off the topic, but important to say. Physical bullying is what we're probably more familiar with, and this is hurting not only a person's body, but their possessions. So taking another child's phone and stepping on it, or breaking a child's pencil, while they're using it to write, like that's bullying. That's not kind. So stepping in. The last thing, which is the hardest thing for children to get away from, is the cyberbullying. Sending text messages, emails, getting really embarrassing pictures and sending it out to all the rest of the friends. Creating fake profiles and sending messages to friends pretending like they're that child. Spreading rumors on social media. This is the age we're having to talk to children at a younger and younger age about how pictures are permanent on the internet. Like, if you take a picture of yourself, it is on there forever. So think very carefully about what you post to social media. Think very carefully of a picture that you text a friend, because let's say you're not friends with that person anymore. They now have that picture forever. And so talking about this idea of netiquette and appropriate behavior in internet behavior, we need to start that early. Like, we're talking 3rd grade. So because children are getting phones in like 2nd and 3rd grade, and they're getting social media in 2nd and 3rd grade. Children are getting TikTok in 4th grade. It's incredible to me how so many children are on social media. So if they're going to be on there, then we need to teach them how to act on there, and we need to moderate their actions. Okay, I think that was it for bullying. Questions?
I actually have a quick little story.
Yeah, go for it, Abby.
Since my mom, she's a single mother, we had to move a lot. I probably moved to around like 8 different elementary schools, and I was always the new kid in the classes, and so I was on the younger side. I was probably the 2nd youngest in most of my classes, and I came to a new school, and it was during the last half of 6th grade, and there is this boy, and he would just, be name calling me because I was one of the younger ones.
Mm-hmm.
And there are some times where I would cry in class. Like, I didn't know how to control my emotions. Like, how can this kid be, telling me things? I barely even know him. And so I just got so fed up with it. One day, we were actually on the bus to San Jose, the Science Museum, and he kept calling me names on the bus, and I was just so fed up with it, and I punched the guy in the face. And the teacher didn't say anything because she knew that he would be name calling me and stuff. And so later on that trip, he came up to me and he apologized. He's like, I'm sorry, for name calling you. And I told him, it's fine. Just don't do that because it hurts people. It's like, I'm new here and I don't really know you. And you start calling me names. It's not very nice. And like what your daughter said to the other child, like it makes you look mean. And that's what I told him. I'm like, you start to seem mean to other people. Mm-hmm. And ever since then, never talked to me, would not look at me during like crossing the hallways, and I would still say hi, but he wouldn't dare to look at me or say hi.
That's a perfect example of the Heinz dilemma. So however you're mm-hmm. feeling right now while we're listening to Abby's story, it will put you in different levels of morality. So if you're thinking in the justice, that's that 3rd level of morality, right? Like, well, that kid had it coming to him, and now he'll know not to mess with Abby anymore. Like, Was it right? Like, no. Did it follow the rules? No. But did that kid deserve it? So that's part of Hein's dilemma. Whereas a younger child would have been saying, ooh, Abby, you're going to be in trouble. So different more moral stages or stages of morality. Sometimes I don't want to advocate physical violence for young children, but children have a limit to what they can take. And so if you continue to push children, you get children who snap. So let's get in there and intervene early. Let's know the signs of bullying. And that's actually my next slide. Look at that transition. So the signs of bullying. And bullies, it's a common misconception to think, well, bullies bully because they don't feel good about themselves. And I will be the first to admit, I used to tell my daughter that, like, oh, they probably just have low self-esteem and they're trying to make you feel the way that they do. That's not always the case. In fact, research shows that many bullies actually have very high self-esteem. They have very low levels of empathy. So they feel real good about themselves, but they don't know how to be kind and put themselves in other people's shoes. That lack of empathy was never instilled in them. So these are children who probably were told that they were great at everything. So you're amazing. Nothing you do is wrong. Like, everything you do is perfect. You're the perfect child. And then also told, well, that child doesn't work as hard as you, so you're better than that other child. So it's this feeling of entitlement. It's this feeling of having high self-esteem. And they're not able to say, I wonder how that child feels who just fell down and scraped their knee. I wonder how that child feels when I spread rumors about them. They can't put themselves in that situation. So how do we look for children who have been bullied? What signs should we be on the lookout for to make sure that we can intervene early? If your child comes home, or if a child is in your classroom and has unexplainable injuries, that's a good sign. If it's not from another child, it's something that you should intervene with anyways, because it's probably a sign of different kinds of abuse. If the child keeps having lost or destroyed possessions and not able to explain how they were lost or how they were destroyed. If you see changes in eating and sleeping, so either they're eating more than usual because they're trying to eat their feelings, so to speak, or if they lose appetite completely. And the same with sleeping. If all they're wanting to do is sleep, that's also a sign of depression. And if they're not sleeping enough or not getting enough sleep, that could be anxiety. Declining grades in school and declining desire to even go to school are also signs of bullying. A loss of friends. So if you see that child beginning to isolate completely or not having any connections with other children, that can also be a sign. If you see them feeling really down about themselves, that's another sign of bullying. And then lastly, self-destructive behavior. So violence against themselves. So that can be anything from cutting themselves to hitting their head on the wall to hitting themselves in the head because they feel so badly about themselves. They don't believe they deserve to be treated kindly. I always hate ending on a really negative note, but that's the end of our time together. Are there questions before I stop the recording?
Yeah, I had, because there was no slide that kind of went over this, but it's just kind of in general. Because I want to work with preschool kids. And so at that level, it's still a little easier to encourage friendships. But once you get to this middle childhood age, I think of all like the awkward kids who didn't make friends, who didn't know how, I was one of the nice people, but there's still those kids who are like, you just can't connect with. So how do you, as an adult now looking at the situation, how do you encourage and help them make friends? Because now seeing how important apparently it is for them to have friends, I think of those kids who didn't have any, and it's like how depressed they could have been, or like it makes sense that maybe they were so awkward and difficult and sad. And So how do you, at that level in the middle childhood area, how do you encourage friendships or help them in a way?
Good question. So I'm really supportive of common interest clubs. So maybe it's the Dungeons and Dragons club, or it's the chess club, or it's the Xbox club, or it's, something that children can do together and bring children that might not necessarily have been their original thought as a friend, like, oh, I didn't realize we had this in common. Hey, you're pretty good at this game. A Minecraft club, just anything that find out what that child who's isolating themselves, what are they interested in? Maybe they're an excellent artist. Let's do an art club and bring all these artists together. And now they have that common interest that builds friendships.
Right.
And a lot of times when you're separating people from their go-to social group, children are more inclined and more motivated to connect with other people. So having it in a separate space and having these clubs where you're only interacting with these people who with a similar interest and not your typical social club.
Okay. And does temperament alone play into that? Is it the kind of the same kind of combination of nature and nurture, is like it's their temperament plus maybe their parents are socially awkward or something? Like where can that stem from?
Yeah, so temperament can play a big role in friendships, but oftentimes you'll see children with different temperaments in the same social group because of interest. Interests are going to trump all things.
Okay.
For example, within my daughter's social friend group, she has a friend who's very, very quiet with everyone else, except for the people that she's gained trust from, and she trusts them. And it's funny to hear teachers and other children say that she never talks. And I'm like, really? She talks all the time at my house. But they attract different temperament styles because they all like a certain thing. They all like many of the same things, so they attract in that way, and then with comfort they start to interact within their own temperaments.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. Any other questions? I'm going to go ahead and stop the recording.